Hello. In conversations about assessment, terms that often come up are formative and summative. So those are the key concepts that we're focusing on today, when you will find out more about the ways in which testing and assessment can be used formatively, summatively. And I'm joined today by Dr. Peter Gu from Victoria University of Wellington to talk about these different uses of assessment.
So, Peter, two of the terms that often come up in assessment and testing are formative and summative. At least I pronounce it summative. I think some people say summative, but so formative and summative. So, briefly, what's the difference between the two?
The kind of tests we traditionally know are basically for summative purposes. Summative tests are mainly the tests that we do at the end of a semester, at the end of a teaching learning period. The whole purpose is to see how students have learned and mastered what you have taught them. So that's summative, summing up the learning and teaching. Whereas formative assessment focuses on the process of learning. That's why it's formative. It doesn't care about the end product. It's mainly a purpose. So we're talking about formative purposes and summative purposes of assessment. So it's mainly a purpose to improve learning and teaching.
Okay, great. So most teachers will be familiar with summative assessment. They're the tests they give to measure achievement. It might be at the end of a whole course, or it might be at the end of a unit of work, but they're quite familiar with that. So let's focus today on formative. And I think formative is similar to another session we've done on monitoring learning and signs of learning. So it's about the process of learning. Yeah. Okay, so having said that, so what does it look like? What does formative assessment look like?
As I just said, it's a purpose rather than a type of test. So a quick answer to that question would be there's no shape. There's no particular shape for formative assessment. Any assessment that can be used formatively can be called formative assessment. That said, not every kind of test is born to be equal in terms of being made formatively, being used formatively. So it's whether you have detailed, the test itself, whether it can, by using it, you can obtain detailed enough information to inform you as a teacher as to how the students have learned something so far. So, because without those detailed information, you won't be able to inform, to feed back to your students as to what they can do next.
And I suppose we mustn't forget that it also gives the teacher information about whether she or he is actually teaching effectively. Sure, it's not just about the learners, it's about the teacher learning as well.
Exactly.
Okay, so do we know, what do we know about how this works? Does it work? Does formative assessment work?
Oh, definitely. Actually, there has been a number of reviews, extensive reviews of research on formative assessment. After those reviews, almost everybody would say that formative assessment is useful. In fact, so much so, one of the two of the major researchers in the field, Black and William, have summarized formative assessment in really surprising way. I quote them: when implemented well, formative assessment can effectively double the speed of student learning.
Wow, double the speed of student learning.
Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. So why does it work?
It's mainly a matter of one, feedback, and two, students' self-control and self-monitoring. And as you were talking about monitoring and checking whether you are learning something well enough, so the feedback can be internal and can be external. Of course, when you're talking about the teacher doing the formative assessment, and you are using any sort of elicitation measure, even including, for example, classroom observations and questioning, can be a form of formative assessment. Through these elicitation measures, you get to know detailed information in terms of how the students are performing, how well they have learned certain things, and then you give them feedback. You give yourself feedback as a teacher to improve the teaching. You give your students feedback to improve their learning. So by doing that, you are involving, you're not just giving them feedback, you're also involving the students in thinking about their own learning.
And so therefore, I guess it's a form of motivating the learners as well, which we've always talked in an earlier session about the importance of assessment and testing to motivate students, not just to judge their performance.
Sure. You're not just giving them a score. If you get a good score, of course, that's motivating. Especially for students who are having some problems learning. Even for good students, you sometimes find you're not learning something. For those kind of circumstances, being told that this particular aspect of learning is incomplete or deviant from the ideal form, and then giving chances to close that gap between your current level of performance and the ideal level of performance, and that is formative assessment. That's what's making it work.
Okay, and I suppose if your good students are not learning something, that's a real occasion for the teacher to think about what she's doing.
Exactly. So that gives the teacher feedback in terms of rather than what she's doing well, but what she's doing wrong.
Exactly. Very important to think about that.
Yeah.
So what would be a couple of key elements to formative assessment?
I would say if I have to sum up formative assessment into, in terms of the key elements, I would say two major elements that makes formative assessment work, and that is, number one, it has to be informative. Whatever form it takes, the assessment will have to obtain enough formative information, informative information, informing the teacher, informing the student in terms of the learning. And the next most important thing is, after getting the informative information, the informing side is there, but for learning to progress from there, there has to be forming. So there has to be action taken either on the side of the teacher or both, on the side of the teacher in terms of changing what should be taught next, and in terms of helping the learners to do something in terms of, for example, designing classroom activities and tasks or homework for the students.
That reminds me of a quote we sometimes use in teaching writing, and it's about feedback. I think the quote is something like, the most important thing about feedback is students do something with it.
Exactly.
Okay, because without that, no learning.
Without, no matter how much the feedback, how accurate the feedback is, without the students acting on the feedback, nothing progresses from that.
Okay, and clearly we want progress to happen. And I guess part of the message from today's talk is that we don't just wait till the end of the course to think about assessment. We need to be thinking about it all the way through, using formative assessment to improve the learning outcomes for our students and to improve our own teaching for the students' benefit. Thank you.